Great day. The 80s shaped generations of pop culture fans. 1984 in particular is considered one of the greatest years in entertainment history. We saw movies like Ghostbusters, The Terminator, The Karate Kid, and Indiana Jones and the Temple to Doom. Iconic moments included Hulk Hogan winning his first WWF title from the Iron Sheik. The MTV Video Music Awards first aired, and we saw the debut of The Cosby Show and Miami Vice. On the music side, we had Michael Jackson's Thriller, Jump by Van Halen, The Heart of Rock and Roll by Huey Lewis and the News, and then there was a series of songs from this guy. Prince's landmark album, Purple Rain, was released on June 25th, 1984. The feature film came out 2 days after. Music journalist Andrea Swensson has published a beautiful in-depth retrospective on the artist who had yet to change his name to an unpronounceable symbol. Prince and Purple Rain, 40 Years, captures one of the most important names in music at the height of his creativity. Andrea joins us with an inside look at what was going on 40 years ago. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right. So I was thinking back 40 years ago, and the very first concert I went to when I was in college, my boyfriend came to me and said, "Hey, I have tickets to this concert at the Frank Erwin Center." I was like, "Okay, who is it?" He goes, "A guy named Prince." I'm like, "Who's that?" Yeah, now we know exactly who that is. But let me go back into your background, Andrea, because you are from Minnesota, which is a big connection for sure.
Yes, I've been a music journalist in the Twin Cities for 20 years, and I specialize in local music, and Prince is the ultimate local artist for us. So I had to become an expert in all things Prince, and I got a chance to see many performances of his out at his complex, Paisley Park, and to meet him and to get invited to all sorts of things that he was doing in the final years of his life. It's been quite an amazing ride. And then, now that he's gone, to continue that work and pay tribute to him with things like this book, it's really meaningful for me.
Yeah, and music is really meaningful. Like every one of those songs, people, if they were old enough to hear it the first time around, remember where they were when they heard those songs. All right, you've been journaling since you were 6 years old, and your high school teacher encouraged you to do more.
Yeah, I didn't ever consider myself a writer until I think she made some kind of offhanded comment I think I was 11th grade, saying, "You're the best writer in my class." And I said, who me? I'm a writer? I didn't realize that. So it really set me on this path. When I got to college, I was a music major, but I realized that I really enjoyed writing for the student newspaper and reviewing bands and interviewing bands and being around musicians and going out to lots of shows. And that just set me on this now 2-decade-long journey of being in music.
Yeah, and you found a niche early. Like, what made you decide that I'm going to write about music? Music is fascinating for so many different reasons, and not only the music itself, but the people behind it, right? There's always a story. I always say, we know where people are, but how did they get there? That's the story.
I think the wonderful thing about music is that you can talk about all kinds of things. You can talk about being a human being and having emotions and getting through hard times and connecting with people. So interviewing musicians is really interviewing people about their life experiences, and it just happens to all be centered around music. Yeah. I know with a lot of the people that I've talked to about Prince, we're talking about these songs and their experience being in the band, but it's also just what that meant for them and what it meant for Prince to acknowledge their talent and to be around someone who was such a genius at his craft.
Yeah, let's talk about this book. First of all, it's beautiful, and I love this this purple velvet cover here. Tell us how the book is set up and what types of things people will find in it.
Well, I really wanted to give people a backstory. So if you only know Purple Rain, you're going to get to know Prince through this book. The first chapter talks about going back to his childhood and upbringing in Minneapolis and his early band. He was in a band starting in high school with his friends called Grand Central. So you'll learn a little bit about that. And then you'll learn about the 5 albums that he released before Purple Rain, which I think sometimes people forget about because that was the entry point for so many people.
And then how growing up, he actually had it in his DNA. His dad was a musician.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes, his dad was a jazz musician. His mother briefly sang in his dad's band too, so it was definitely in the family. And he was really inspired by this rich culture of Black musicians in Minneapolis, which I think has been overlooked historically because at the time, in the 70s, the population of African American people was very small, 2% of the total state of Minnesota. But in that population was Prince, Morris Day, Andre Simone, Jimmy Jam, and Terry Lewis. All of their fathers were musicians and part of this community. So Prince really came out of this very rich, vibrant, creative community to make this art.
Yeah, and you're right. We do overlook it because we always think about Detroit, and Motown. But yeah, there was definitely a vibrant community there in Minneapolis as well. All right, the first 5 releases for you: Prince, Dirty Mind, Controversy, 1999. He had hit after hit after hit. There's a quote by Prince where he said, "My goal is to excite and provoke on every level," and he did.
I love that. Yes, he and was constantly pushing forward and looking for the next thing, to see how far he came from his first album to Dirty Mind, and then from Dirty Mind in 1999. I mean, these are leaps and bounds. He's reinventing himself. He's coming up with new hairstyles, new costumes, new looks, new vibes to go along with every album as well. And by the time he got to 1999, that's when a lot of people started acknowledging his talent. He was starting to appear on MTV. He was starting to appear on Top 40 Radio with those breakout singles. So he was really poised for this moment by the time that Purple Rain came out.
Yeah, I got a sense that he didn't care what people thought. He was just doing what he wanted to do.
I think you're absolutely right about that. And I think we even saw that in the Purple Rain period because, he was expected to go on a world tour to support this album. It was so wildly successful. When Purple Rain came out in the theaters, he had the #1 single, the #1 album, and then very quickly the #1 film in America, which is a triumph.
Yeah.
But when the tour rolled out, he said he got bored.
Oh, yeah.
By 6 months in, he was on to the next thing. He already had a new album in the can, and he was bored.
He's like, I don't have time for all that. All right. And he also did some other things. I just remember at that time elevating women. So, of course, Wendy, who plays the first, opening part of Purple Rain on the guitar. There was Apollonia, there was Sheila E., there was Vanity.
Yes, he has a great history of supporting women. Behind the decks, too, Susan Rogers was the engineer for much of this material. He also worked with a female engineer in Sunset Sound called Peggy McCreary. So he was constantly surrounding himself with women, and I think he felt safe with women. I think he felt like he could express himself and be vulnerable and do what he wanted to do creatively. He trusted women, and he definitely wanted to uplift them and put them in the spotlight alongside him.
Yeah. You covered him, you wrote about him, and then you got to meet him at the Purple Rain 30th anniversary. What was that moment like? Because when we're in someone's space or talk about them or around them for so long, and then all of a sudden they're there in front of you, it's kind of crazy, isn't
Yes. It is crazy. So I had been out to Paisley Park for events, DJ nights, concerts. But to walk into Paisley Park and have it be empty was a whole other experience. And he came right out and he shook my hand and he looked at me with his absolutely enormous, disarming eyes. And I kind of melted for a second. And then I had to keep it together because I wanted to use all of the time that I was going to have with him. And I didn't know how much time there would be. And we started talking. And I think the point he really wanted to make by inviting me out on that night, it was the 30th anniversary of Purple Rain, and I had just covered it for the radio station where I worked, was that he had no interest in looking back. He didn't see any purpose in celebrating an anniversary. He was constantly on to the next thing. So he led me down the studio and he pushed the door to his studio open. And he said, "This is what I'm doing now." And he played me 2 full new albums that he had recorded and that he was going to release that year. Wow. And I think the point was, for us, we might like to look back at Purple Rain and think of it as this big cultural moment. But for
him, nostalgic for us, yeah.
Yes, for him, it didn't mean anything in that moment because he was always creating something else. Yeah. But, he was also a Gemini. So I do think part of him appreciated it and wanted to.
What did you say? You said he was also a Gemini? Is that what you said? Yeah,
Yes.
so am I. Yeah, Prince and I, Anyway, look, I'm in the same category as Prince on something. He also very much appreciated you because after that interview, he invited you on a number of things to cover a number of things that he wanted documented. He appreciated your work. The thing about music is that when you have such great iconic music like that, even though he's not here physically on this earth, he will always be here. There's a whole generation of people listening to his music who have no idea that he passed away. He's still alive in the music.
Yeah, that's really poignant. I mean, I think that's the point of my work now, is that I want to honor him and to say thank you for the opportunity that he gave me, and even acknowledging my presence and encouraging me to keep going. And I really wrote this book with the intention of having it reach people that don't know a lot about him. I wanted to write it in a really inviting and accessible way, and to invite people into this celebration of him, because his music is going to live forever and it's going to stand out. He was a voice of a generation, and a once in a generation kind of artist. And I really hope that he can continue to be remembered that way.
Yeah, well, I love the book. It's a beautiful book. You did a great job. If you ever come to Houston, let's go crazy. Let's go nuts. We'll have a good time. But
I would love that.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. You can find Andrea Swensson's beautiful new book, Prince and Purple Rain, 40 Years, at your favorite independent bookstore or directly on Andrea's website. For more information and links, visit greatdayhouston.com and we will connect you.